Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Whitetail Rendezvous is pleased to announce a partnership with GoHunt.com. Who's GoHunt.com? Well, if you're a DIY hunter, you need the information at GoHunt.com/insider. Why? Because it provides 4,200 profiles, every unit, every species, and every season. Furthermore, they give in-depth analysis, interactive maps, unit access, and seasonal trends. Draw odds are very important, and they give you the most accurate information in the business. All this is available when you go to GoHunt.com/insider. Make sure you use promo code WR when you join Insider. You'll get a $50 gift card for GoHunt.com Gear Shop. Remember, when you become a member of GoHunt.com/insider, you're going to get a $50 gift card to Go Hunt Gear Shop. What's in the gear shop? The best gear that you can buy for hunting the West. All in all, if you're hunting out West in 2018, GoHunt.com/insider is where you need to be to get all the research information. When you use promo code WR, Whitetail Rendezvous receives a small commission from GoHunt.com. Welcome to the second installment of Land Management with Land and Legacy, sponsored by, provided by, offered by Whitetail Rendezvous podcast. And I have Matt Dye, who is the owner. He and Adam Keith own Land and Legacy. Matt, today we're going to talk about boots on the ground. In the last segment, we talked about why land management. And folks, if you haven't listened to that, go to my website, whitetailrendezvous.com, and go back. And I don't remember the number right now, but it's there. And just look for this mini series and, listen to that, because that'll help you understand what we're going to talk about today, boots on the ground. Matt, so we answered the question. I called up and said, I got a 40 acre, 120 acres, and I want somebody to put eyes on it. And you helped me understand why, land management was important to me and my buddies on our farm. Now we're going to go boots on the ground. So tell us about that process in the next 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where the fun portion happens, because we've already established that, okay, based on your hunting seasons, your success or failures, or just overall knowledge of the habitat, that something needs to change. Something isn't clicking. It's not working. You're not seeing what you want to see. You want to see improvements. So we've established that land management is necessary on your property. And now we are actually able to take action and get all the information Adam and I need to be able to make our proper recommendations. So I think that this is a common thing, honestly, that happens. I'm a little, I guess, upset to see it. Is where someone posts a map, let's say, to social media and says, I've got this issue, how do I solve it? And then you get you get a big thread of comments and explanations and such from a lot of folks offering advice, which is great. I like to see people offering advice to those who are looking for it. That's incredible. And I think that's honestly what our hunting community needs more of. However, one thing that we have to be careful and mindful of when doing that is understanding that things aren't always what they seem in an aerial photo. If you ever, Bruce, you go out west all the time, you probably looked at aerial photos of properties or portions of public ground and said, oh, that's going to be a great place to find elk, or that's going to be a great place to find sheep. And then you get there and it's different from what you honestly thought your initial thoughts were when you're looking at that aerial photo. Have you ever experienced that?
Lots of times.
Yeah, I feel like everyone can kind of put themselves in that position. And again, that's why, there's a big difference between just an aerial photo of a property versus being on the ground, boots on the ground approach. So again, it's great to offer advice, but just looking at an aerial photo is only step one of this recommendation process. So again, we've established that land management is necessary. Now, step one to get boots on the ground is for Adam and I, after we've been contacted about a consultation, is to look and study aerial photos. And we want to look at Huntera maps because they've got awesome topo lines, and we can really look at the high definition images, understand the flow of the property, the terrain changes, whether there's saddles in place, or honestly, if there's no terrain changes, we got to understand exactly what we're looking at. So that's a great resource for us to use. We use it often. Google Earth is another one, because of the fact that we can go and say, okay, this is the most current image that's on Google Earth, but then we can actually slide it back and backdate it 15 years ago, and then we can understand if and what changes have occurred to that habitat that may point a finger or draw a conclusion to why that hunter is seeing what he's seen. So let's say 15 years ago, that property was logged. Maybe it was a previous owner, but it was logged. And for the first 7 to 10 years, that hunting right after that harvest was really, really good. There was a lot of food offered, there was a lot of cover offered. But now, because if you go back to that first podcast we just did there, Bruce, you can go back and listen and say, okay, that habitat has changed because I haven't been manipulating it and it's getting out of reach, or the benefit is getting less. And so now my hunting is tailing off too. It's decreasing. My success is decreasing because that habitat is also decreasing. So we can go back and look on that information through Google Earth image, say, okay, well, this is likely why you're seeing what you're seeing or not seeing in the hunting situation because the habitat has changed. So before we get to the property, we want to gather as much information as we can about the property. We'll ask the landowner questions about, maybe some neighbors, their experiences, their habitat work thus far. But here's the important thing is we take that information, honestly, with a little bit of a grain of salt and keep an open mind. We can infer things based on those maps. That's why we don't make recommendations until we get our boots on the ground. So we've gathered our information, we go to the property, and now we're at the property. And we want to see 90+% of this property because we know the value of the recommendations that need to be made, and we know the implications of poorly suggested information. And we don't want to make that mistake. So again, we don't want to simply look at an aerial photo ahead of time and be like, okay, well, this is going to have to happen, this is going to have to happen, and we're going to place it here. Let's just go spend some time on property. It's not like that at all for us. And we say, okay, this is what we got, this is what we're working with. In our head, we might say, well, that's an area of interest we need to spend a lot of time at. Or this is an area of interest we need to spend quite a bit of more time at. So we then go and get boots on the ground and confirm or realize that our first initial suspicions weren't correct. So again, we're traveling and seeing 90+% of the property. We're on the road system. If we get to a habitat change, we want to get out of that UTV or that truck and walk around, understand it. We need to understand how deer or other game species are utilizing that area or not utilizing it at all. There's a lot of places on properties that honestly could be characterized as dead zones. The habitat is not in a position or the topography is not changing in an area that's going to concentrate deer down. So really the sign is very minimal, or the sign is spread out across 100 yards wide of an area. And it's like, well, a deer could walk here, or they could walk there the next day, or over here. There's just not an edge that is going to funnel deer around a property. I've always heard deer are creatures of the edge, and it's so true because one, they like to walk the edge. It's a travel corridor, a natural travel corridor, but two, the species that they, like vegetation-wise, that they actually key into, and the forbs, the early successional vegetation types, those grow along the edge because they get more sunlight. So they just naturally want to walk there because they're natural browsers. They walk and eat, and if you can create that, that's a huge plus. It's a great hunting tactic. But we want to see that property in its fullest. So we spend as much time as necessary to walk the property or drive around and really understand how deer utilize or don't utilize that property. Confirm or deny, again, what we see in aerial photos. Lay out. At that point, we're able to make more confident recommendations to the property owner in the field. When we're out there, we can say, okay, we've got this slope over here. This would be a great area to encourage deer to bed in. And it may seem kind of weird to put deer off of a slope. Why not put them down in the bottom, or why not let them bed on the ridgetop? Well, for one reason, it's easiest for us to walk along the ridgetop. It's easiest for access. Road systems typically are along ridgetops. So I don't want deer to be bedded where I'm going to be walking most of my time. And again, ridgetops, the scent and the way the wind blows is a lot more consistent. So I can consistently hunt that area and bank on, okay, it says I've got a west wind. It's actually blowing with a west wind. It's not swirling. And deer prefer to bed on slopes or areas where that wind is going to swirl, so they can stay, they're up to speed on what honestly in and around them. If there's any predators coming, if we're approaching as hunters, whatever it may be, they can detect that sooner because that wind swirls and it's coming from this direction, this direction, this direction. So that slope, once we get in there and see it, we can lay out a bedding area thicket and suggest that habitat manipulation be done there, because maybe it's in a closer proximity to a food plot, or maybe we can put another bedding area thicket on the other side of the ridge, and we're going to get deer crossing back and forth, and a hunter can access that area that they're going to be crossing back and forth. So I think the big thing is getting an idea of what we may be seeing prior to getting to that property, but keeping an open mind until we actually are on site and can confirm what we see on a map. Because, again, like we've said before, Bruce, we could both look back at instances where we're hunting public ground and we're states away trying to understand a property the best we can. And then we get there, we're like, oh, this was going to be a great spot. But in all reality, it's not very good at all. So I'm going to X that off the map and go on. But that map or that aerial photo didn't basically tell all the truths of that specific area. So again, we gotta be mindful of making recommendations prior to getting on site.
Now, when somebody calls you guys up and says, hey, I'm interested in working and making my land better, do you ask them to do any homework before you show up for boots on the ground?
Oftentimes, we'll ask simple questions like, what's your neighborhood like? Or I honestly try, or Adam and I try not to ask too many questions, because again, we still want that open mind as we go to the property. We want enough information, but not too much that we try in our head and get ahead of ourselves and think, okay, well, this could happen or this could happen. We're going to experience this. No, let's just sit back honestly and wait until we get there and confirm everything. But it might be simple questions, like I said, of, has the timber been harvested recently? How many acres of food plots do you have currently? And what's the overall neighborhood like? Is there a lot of hunting pressure around you? Simple questions like that. And then from there, usually when we get on site, we sit down over a map and discuss all that process again. We want to really understand, okay, this is that neighbor that you referred to in your email. Oh, this is that farm you talked about that just ran cattle all year round throughout the timber. So it's a really kind of a dead area over there. Go through that process again. But the questions leading into a consultation are really simple. And again, it's just for Adam and I as consultants to keep an open mind and then confirm everything once we get on site. And honestly, we kind of have to give the disclosure sometimes to some landowners as we're touring around, as we're walking around and seeing the property. That's Adam and my time. That's us taking inventory. That's us saying, okay, yep, this is here. This is that habitat type. This needs to change. This is poor habitat. This is good habitat. Basically putting all in our heads. So sometimes we walk around or we're driving around and we're just kind of quiet. and they're kind of like looking at us like, are you good? Are you seeing? Do you need to stop? Do you need to see more? Like, hey, no, we're good. We're taking inventory. We're cataloging all this information, so then we can get back to our office or on the ride home where Adam and I discuss the property, and that's when really all the plans just kind of come out. So we can make strong recommendations in the field, but really that concrete recommendation comes after we even leave a property because we've seen it. Adam and I have conversations, and sometimes, Bruce, honestly, we may not agree on exactly what may need to happen or the exact placement of a bed and area thick or the exact timing that this timber needs to be harvested or whatever it may be. We may not necessarily agree. So then we sit down again over a map and go over things and see how that would affect this versus that and the manipulation of everything over time. What's going to be the best scenario? So I hope that makes sense as to kind of our process as a land and wildlife consultant, the thought processes that we go through and the actions that we take, and then what comes of the actual plan and how that's developed kind of through time from the initial contact that someone, whether they email us or find us on Facebook or Instagram, whatever it may be, or they've listened to our podcast, however they contact us, these are the steps that we take to finally make the proper recommendations. Because, Bruce, I know we've had a lot of conversations about making, honestly, the best choices that we can for the habitat, because a lot of times the land, it may have been passed down from generations, or you may have just bought a property and you want to then pass it down to your kids. So the decisions that you make can last your lifetime. They can last and influence your children's lifetime when the property is turned over to them. So our recommendations that we make, honestly, we take them to heart, and we want to make sure that when we say something, that it's the right steps. It's the right path for you to take to experience and reach your goals on your property. It's not, oh yeah, you could do that here and hinge cut all this whole woodlot. That's not a technique that we're going to suggest, because that's going to drastically influence the timber value, the productivity of that woodlot for many, many years to come. That woodlot will likely never, ever look the same. So we've got to understand the implications of the techniques, but also understand the end result and what's going to look like, not only 2 years down the road, but 20 years down the road. Because again, these are resources, and resources need to be managed, not simply destroyed or left alone. We've got to find that middle ground, and that's where and why Adam and I love what we do, because we take that time to walk a property, to make those recommendations, for us to talk through it and look over a map and build a custom map for a property and write out a management plan that makes sense for that landowner, his family, to reach their stated goals, whether it may just be simply have more opportunity to harvest deer, maybe not even a specific caliber of deer, or maybe it's a lot of our clients also have kids, and like I want to have the opportunity to chase just at least one mature buck on the property, but then my kids be successful, they can shoot whatever they want. Or it's the guy I'm strictly a trophy hunter, I want the most mature deer, or I just want the most deer, whatever it may be. We need to make the suggestions that are going to allow them and their property to reach those goals.
I think about, you mentioned, timber harvest, and on every woodlot, there's value not only in just the ground, but in the timber. And sometimes people miss that connection between, you can do a whole timber plan that generates revenue, that generates, i.e., any improvements that you're going to make, for the land management plan. And sometimes people forget that, because it's all symbiotic. It all feeds together, to the betterment of all the habitat, not just whitetail. You mentioned squirrels and bunnies and turkeys and coyotes are part of that. Predators are part of that. So and all the birds, and it's just tremendous. If you sit in your 40 and just sit there for a day, out of season, so you're not all amped up waiting for Mr. Wonderful, and look at what uses your land, you'd be amazed.
It is simply amazing. And Bruce, one of the craziest things, and this is off topic. I know that Adam, co-owner of Land and Legacy, I know that he's going to talk about it too when you interview him with the food plot section of this series. And I hope everyone takes a second to honestly think about this. But we think of all the diversity of plant species, of animal species that we see and observe on a daily basis. What the craziest thing is, Bruce, is that underneath the ground in the soil, in healthy soil, there's more life than above ground. It is microscopic, it is bacteria, it is fungi, but that diversity in the soil allows us to see and experience what happens above the ground. But that base, that foundation is more diverse than what we can even experience and see. Again, it's microscopic, but it's still life, and it's still the foundation that gives us the ability to, whether it's manage the deer, manage the timber, just enjoy creation with kids. That basis is even more diverse than what we see. I oftentimes have to stop and think about that, and just, I guess, in amazement, like, that's incredible.
Yeah, it is. And every earthworm and beetle and bug and plant and root systems, you think of all that, if that's healthy, your above ground stuff is healthy. That's not healthy. If that's dead, well, you're screwed.
That's true. Or just you have to amend the soil more, or you have to put more into it, and then your crop, if you will, is just limited. So that's a whole nother topic. I know Adam will talk about it. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, be sure to listen to that podcast with Bruce as well. But it's still fun to think about.
Well, it is. And I think, boots on the ground, we're creatures of habit. And the older we get, the more habit we are, because, I don't want to climb that ridge or whatever. And so, things change. As the land changes, you change, but the terrain stays the same. And by boots on the ground, you can really see that. And I like what you said about, the wind swirls, because sometimes people will understand and it works fine, then all of a sudden they start to get busted. What happened is one tree got blown over, one tree died, is no longer there. So it changed the whole wind flow coming off that ridge or the bump or whatever you want to call it, and they didn't realize it.
Yep. We've got to, and honestly, a lot of times, some of the clients that we have, Bruce, have been doing habitat management for years. They've been managing their property and doing a fine job of it. However, through time, things change. And sometimes it's for the good, sometimes it's for the bad. And no matter what, they've experienced changes in their hunting. They may not be happy, they may not be satisfied, but they just need simply a second pair of eyes on a property. Like that honestly is probably about half of the consultations that we actually go out in the field and do are people. One, the first half is a new property, a new landowner. So that's kind of one category. Or two, the other is, hey guys, I need a second set of eyes. I've been doing stuff on my property, but it's not all clicking. Things have changed. I need a second set of eyes on this property to help me get to where I need to be. And it's because we can go through a property, if you've owned it for even 5 years or 20 years, we take the same route. We see it consistently enough that those slower changes that we're going to see in the habitat over that time frame aren't as big to you because you see it all the time. But for us, we come in and we say, well, this is the first time on the property, but really this habitat has changed from when you bought it or when you got it passed down to you to now. And it's not, you're expecting it to produce the same thing as it did 20 years ago because it's the same area, but the habitat has changed drastically. And with a fresh set of eyes that we can bring when we are boots on the ground, we can say, actually, when we look at this property or this portion of the property, productivity wise, it's very low for what you're trying to achieve. And again, we're simply bringing that second set of eyes to either confirm or influence or share our insight on what the current state of habitat is, because it's tough for people to see those changes that have happened because they're so used to seeing a property, or it's tough for them to bite the bullet and say, I've got a big habitat management project ahead of me. I think this is the right move, but I don't know. And before I do it, I want a second set of eyes. I want a second opinion on it before they dive headfirst into making a large change. So that's something that we commonly see.
I was sitting here thinking, so you're walking my property, and I've been there for a while, and some of the tree stands have been there for a while, and all of a sudden, we get back to the barn, the house, kitchen table, and we're sitting around the office, and I'm going, well, what do you think, guys? And said, well, we're going to build a plan, blah blah blah, and we'll get back to you. But okay, what'd you see in the last half day or something? And then you start telling me about my land, and even though I've been there for 20 years, you see it completely different, as you just said. And then you gave me a cold shower and said, Bruce, I can tell you right now why your hunting has decreased. Then you just chapter and verse it, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there going, well, I feel bad that I didn't realize that I didn't change with the land.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you handle that human emotion or human interplay there?
That's a great question. and that's something, honestly, that we face. We have to, I guess if you will, sometimes break the news to people. But here's the thing, with that potential negative, I guess, if you will, of breaking the news to people that their habitat's not as good as what they thought. What I know and I do on my own and do across the country is change the habitat, manipulate it, and make it better. Like, the thing is, we might go to a place and it's not as good as as some folks may wish it to be, but it can only get better. It can only improve from that point on. And honestly, if the worse the habitat is, the easier it is to see the benefit of doing habitat manipulation. Because let's say your property is already good, and you've got, let's say you're managing 80% of the property. You want to influence, let's just say, the 20 extra percent that you're not really touching right now. Well, the growth or the benefit is less on that 20% for you to be able to witness and see, most likely, than it is for someone who has poor habitat, who hasn't seen the changes that have happened over time. So that, let's say they're sitting at 10% of the property's potential, they're sitting right there at that point. Well, I've got 90% to improve on, and the changes that I'm going to see are drastically going to affect the way deer use that property, turkeys use that property, ducks maybe even use that property. So I know, okay, I've got a lot to improve on, but that means I also have a lot to gain when it comes to a hunting aspect, when it comes to a management aspect, when it comes to seeing the improvements that I want to see. I've got more area, more growth to experience. So in a way, yeah, the initial sting or bite may hurt a touch, but it's better to know that the future holds more positive than any negative. Because again, habitat manipulation, habitat change, habitat management, the proper steps, the proper techniques are going to improve what you can offer on your property.
And with that, folks, we're going to wrap up Boots on the Ground and with Land and Legacy, Matt Dye. And the last thing Matt and I are going to chat about coming up as the third section is the plan. Everything that we invested up to this point, we're going to put it all together and then give a plan, and Matt's going to dissect that for us. So, Matt, let's grab a cup of coffee here and then wrap up this segment of Land and Legacy and Whitetail Rendezvous Land Management.
Sounds good, sir. I appreciate it. I'll fill up my cup.
Hey, folks, a special edition of Whitetail Rendezvous is coming. I've asked 3 companies, Land and Legacy, Rackology, and Grandpa Ray Outdoors, to be part of a series on land management and food plots. So the next few episodes, about 18 of them, in fact, are going to be about either land management or food plots. Why? Because people have been asking me a lot of questions. So I went out and chatted with some guys, and Adam Keith and Matt Dye from Land and Legacy is joining the crew, and At Rackology, we have Jason Obermiller and Eric Fitzgerald. And rounding out the team is Grandpa Ray Outdoors with John O'Brien. Each of them is going to bring a different flavor on what is land management, what are food plots, why you need them, the pros and cons. So listen up to this next series, and I sure hope you like them. If you like them, let me know. If you don't like them, let me know what I can do better. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.